Hello and welcome to the webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and look forward to sharing with you a lot of new updates, exciting updates from Apple on iOS 9 that was released in the last month or so. Some details about our webinar. We'll be running from 12 o'clock now till before 1 p.m. We'll get wrapped up. You should hear audio now. If not, you can dial in. One of the things you have access to is a control panel, and ask that if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to join in and raise your hand or ask a question, and we'll try to get to it if we can. My name is Dave Kyle, and I want to welcome Matt Schmidt. Matt, are you there?
I am here.
Matt
Hello, everyone.
And Matt's joining me from California, so we're on different coasts here presenting today. We both work for Ease Technologies, founded in 1993. Ease provides managed IT services and cloud solutions for nonprofits, legal, and accounting firms, and we're located here in Baltimore, Washington. So let's take a moment to talk about what our agenda is here over the next hour, Matt. One of the things we'll first be doing is sharing some of the new features that include multitasking for the iPad. We'll talk about notifications, some of the new and updated applications that are available for iOS. Matt's going to talk about the wallet or Apple Pay, showing some new features that are capable in Siri. And to start things off, I'll just do a quick poll here with everybody, and just to find out who's got what and what they're using right now. So you should see a poll come out for yourself. I'm going to launch that right now. If you wouldn't mind just taking a minute, I'd like to hear back from you. It's a multiple choice, so you can add if you have an iPad, if you have an iPhone. If you have all four of them, that's fine too. Great. I appreciate everyone doing that. I'm going to close the poll here in a second. That way it gives us enough information to what everybody has. So it looks like most everybody has an iPhone, which would be kind of expected. And we'll jump back into our presentation. So the iOS update is one of the fastest adoption rates that Apple has experienced with an operating system updates, especially for iOS. And right now, as of November 4th, I think it was, there was about 66% acceptance or adoption rate of the iOS. So it was pretty quick. We've always been tracking who's using which smartphones in the business community. And from what we can see right now, especially with our own accounts and what other data we're seeing, iOS and business is about a 70% adoption rate. I mean, there's Android and Windows phones out there, but iOS is very, very popular between iPads and iPhones out there. And Matt, do you want to share a little bit about iOS 9 and its compatibility?
Yeah, I mean, what's one of the most interesting things is that Apple has worked very hard to keep some of the older units to continue to work with the modern operating system. So iOS 9 is compatible with devices as old as the iPad 2 and above, and then the iPhone 4S. So if you've got the iPhone 4 or lower, you would not be able to run iOS 9, and then the original iPad is the only unit on that family that would not be able to run it, which is really great.
And I know we're using iPhone 6s as part of our demonstration, which we're doing a lot of today, and you have an iPad as well that you'll be demonstrating with, right?
Yeah, I have an iPad Air, so it is not certainly not the latest and greatest.
I know you try to get the latest and greatest, but just didn't get it in on time, right?
I did. I have it on order, but unfortunately, it was not shipping, nor was it in stock in the store to have available for today's presentation.
Great. So let's talk about some of the features. And Matt, I think you helped me put together this slide. Do you want to share a little bit about what you're talking about, smaller update and longer battery life?
Yeah, I mean, this is really part of Apple's strategy to make the units that are out there last longer and make them more functional. So the smaller update was the first piece of that, and as you can see on the graphic on the left, the iOS 8 update was 4.58 gigabytes, whereas the iOS 9 is 1.3. That is just an astronomical drop in size. And they've actually put in tools into the SDK for developers to work to make their apps smaller as well. So they really want to make sure that people who have 16 gigabit iPhones or 16 gigabit iPads of the earlier models are still able to use them. And the only way to do that is to shrink the size of not only the operating system but the apps themselves. And they did just an unheard of job in that. The second piece was longer battery life, and this was I found quite interesting because again, the battery is typically one of the first parts to start wearing down on these units. This update will give up to an hour of more battery life for your unit, and that is just with software. There's no hardware changes. It's just the software and how it's written and how it uses power more efficiently. And then it is faster and more responsive. And what they've done, what Apple's done, is really take some of the tools that they had on the Macintosh side and bring them to the iOS. So they use something called Metal, which allows developers and Apple themselves to make more efficient use of the CPU in these units and the graphics processor, which are two different chips inside the iPhone and the iPad. And by doing that, it makes it feel for the user much more faster and much more responsive as you click on things. The newer units like the iPhone 6s, it's blazing fast, but it will feel faster even on the older units themselves.
Yeah, I've noticed it as well. And again, the iPhone 6s that I had just recently had a combination of new hardware and OS, and certainly a new piece of hardware responds more quickly. But I'd say all in all, even some of the other pieces and components that were slower on my iPhone 5s, all in all, are much faster now. Let's talk about and actually jump into some of the demo. I'm going to hand the controls back over to Matt here in one moment, but just kind of an overview of iOS 9. I'd say there's a lot of features that were built into this. We're selecting a handful of them to demonstrate to you. So we're going to be showing you on an iPad and our iPhones some of the features we think are the most important. We're going to avoid things like photography and stuff like that. We're going to focus on more of things like searches, controls, location settings, Siri, things like that is kind of what we're going to do to demonstrate how to be more productive with your iOS 9 for your iPad or your iPhone as well. So Matt, I'm going to take a moment and hang with me whereas we shift controls from myself to Matt and share my screen with you. And that should be coming your way, Matt.
Okay. All right. Can you see my iPad?
Yep, all there.
Great.
Good to go.
So we're gonna do demonstrations on both. Both Dave and I are both going to do demonstrations. I'm going to start on the iPad, and then most of the demos will be from the iPhone, since that is clearly the unit of choice for most of you out there. But there are some really interesting things that they've added to the iPad that we did want to share with you that make the iPad much more useful. So the first one is called multitasking, and there's kind of three aspects to this. So if I have the iPad Air, as I mentioned, so this is not the latest and greatest unit on this front. So the feature of split view, where you can have two apps side by side, is not available on my device, but it would be available on the iPad Air 2 or the new iPad Pro. But what I can show you is if I open up Safari here and I have Google News open, so I have my Safari webpage here. So if I take my finger to the right of the screen and slide that over, I'm going to get basically the apps that I have used most recently pop up. So if I want to be looking at this web page and take notes on it, I can click Notes, and then I can actually bring up the keyboard and look at the Safari on one side and the notes. That's called slide over. So that gives you a little piece of the app on the other side of the screen. Now, if I had a newer unit and I took my finger and I kept sliding to the left, I would actually split that screen between those two apps, and then I could go back and forth between Safari and Notes and do whatever I want. Lastly, there is another feature called Picture in Picture, which they've added, where you could actually have a FaceTime video or a movie or something video picture-wise running in a separate window in the corner while you were in another app. And again, I cannot demonstrate that because this unit won't do that, but it is pretty slick.
Great. What else do you have for us, Matt? I think are you done with the iPad?
Yep.
Are you going to move over to?
Yep, I'm going to move over and switch to the iPhone. So bear with me for 1 second.
Yeah, I do want to add. We're using a couple different tools that allow us to project our phones and our iPads to our computers. We're using our own personal devices, so I just want to give a caveat out there. That, we're trying to control not demo units, but real live units, and we're also trying to manage them and demonstrate them in a way that hopefully we're not going to have any interference with phone calls and things like that. But just want to give you a heads up. We're trying to.
You never know.
If something does happen, it's maybe not part of a demo.
Okay, so now I've got my iPhone here. So we wanted to talk about notifications, which are the items that come in a variety of different ways. And what's interesting is if you go into settings, which is the little gray box with the mechanical wheel on my front page here, it may be somewhere different on yours, and I go down to notifications, the big change for iOS 9 is the way you can sort the order. So you can do it either by the most recent, or you can do it manually in terms of how you sort those. I have mine set by recent, so if I get a news alert, for example, that's going to come in at the top of the list versus something that came in yesterday, for example. And then I can also group those by app, which I can turn on and off. You can see my iPhone, correct?
Yes, we got it.
Okay, just want to make sure.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so and then there is still a great deal of personalization here. So if I don't want, if I want to have AccuWeather, if I want to allow notifications, I can turn that on or off, and I can determine how I want that. Do I want it at as a banner at the top? Do I want that to come in as an alert in the middle of the screen, kind of interrupting any other app that I'm in? Whereas a banner will appear and then disappear within a couple seconds. So you have the ultimate control for any of the apps that have the ability to send some kind of notification. And then you can also allow access when the phone is locked as well. And then you can also turn on and off emergency alerts, Amber alerts, and regular emergency, which I think are probably good to leave on.
So, Matt, I see a couple there you have turned off, like AccuWeather you have turned off. And probably by default, they come turned on. Do you know?
Once you load an app, once you install an app, and it will immediately ask you whether you want to allow that app to send you notifications, and you can determine right at that point, yay or nay, do I want it, do I not want it, and then once it's on, you go in. By default, I think it depends on the developer whether it comes in as a banner or whether it comes in as an actual alert in the middle. Right. But you can go into the settings here and determine how you want that to show up. And then if you change your mind, let's say I said no when I originally installed it, but later on it would actually be helpful to have that. Again, I can go in here and turn that back on and determine how I want it to look.
Yeah, I often go back to my notifications and review which ones I have turned on, turned off, and see what kind of banners I'm getting and how I'm getting those notifications. There's a few that I've turned off that over time I've realized I want to turn back on. For example, I notice you have AAA on there. I think when I'm traveling, sometimes I might you can get a notification about I travel with Southwest, for example. I might keep that off most of the time, but when I'm traveling, I might turn on my notifications for Southwest while I'm in travel.
Right. It really depends on where I am. If I'm somewhere where I'm roaming and I don't necessarily want these things using data, I may really get militant about turning them off.
Right.
And that kind of ties into the next thing that we wanted to talk about, which was cellular settings. And if I go into cellular settings, this is again going to show me what is using cellular data which for some reason, is grayed out for me, but normally would be, I would have the ability here. There are toggle switches on the right. I would have the ability to turn off and turn on, again, whether I want these things to use cellular data. Um, and it may be, I think I turned off the cellular data on here
Yep.
when I was doing some troubleshooting earlier, so that's probably why they're grayed out. The other thing that's new to iOS 9 is something called Wi-Fi Assist. And Wi-Fi Assist will automatically kind of fail over to the cellular data if you're in an area where Wi-Fi connectivity is poor. And this is really kind of freak people out a little bit in terms of not knowing when that was going to be uh, when that was going to fail over to the cellular data. So if you've got a plan that you need to watch your data minutes very carefully, you may want to turn that off. I think by default it's on, and you want to go into the cellular settings all the way at the bottom and turn that off if you don't want that to activate.
Yeah, and yours is turned off right now so that it wouldn't
Mine is
activate.
turned off.
Right.
Right. And then again, as I scroll through all the apps that have the ability to use data, it will also give me underneath those apps the amount of data that's being used. So the iTunes Store, for example, I've used 19.7 megabytes of the total number of data that, if I scroll up, shows me that I've used during my current period. I've used 2.2 gigs. So you really have total control over what happens. Let's see. The other thing that we wanted to share with you is there is something called Personal Hotspot, which is if I go up to the main level of settings, as I look at Personal Hotspot, I can actually turn, and I can't right now because I've disabled my cell data. Actually, let me just go ahead and I'm not going to turn that on because it may screw up with our demonstration here, but
I think it might.
I
Yeah.
can turn that on or off. Yeah, I don't want to lose connectivity. Um, but I can turn my cell phone into a wireless hotspot using that cellular data. I could then connect a laptop or any other device to that and use that as a wireless signal using the cellular data from my phone. So again, you want to be careful if you're on a data plan that you're trying to watch minutes, that you don't use too much data in that way. And then the last thing we wanted to share with you was Wi-Fi calling. And Dave, can you remind me where that is?
I will look because I have to look for it myself. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cheat a little bit here and get to that one. And why don't you explain to that what that is as we're looking for that?
Yeah, so Wi-Fi calling is actually very new. Verizon just this week got approved for it. AT&T got approved a little bit earlier, but it's basically the ability to make phone calls over wireless so that you're not using your data on the cellular network. So this saves minutes and saves time, and I think it's going to be very popular. It's almost like voice over IP phones, but you're using the cell phone instead of the actual cellular minutes.
Yeah,
So we'll
Matt.
look for that
Well,
and
I can tell
share
you what
that
it
with
is.
you.
You go to your phone, go
Oh,
to your in settings, scroll down to phone.
oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay. And then I actually have this turned on because we're on AT&T, so I can make and receive phone calls over Wi-Fi with my AT&T account. And then you want to just make sure there's an update emergency address. So just to make sure that when you dial 911, that they know generally where to go to, you want to make sure that you've got that information updated and it's accurate.
Got it. Yeah. And I've been using this a little bit too. It's actually kind of transparent. I've seen it in use, and what ends up happening instead of the AT&T sign coming up across the top there, a Wi-Fi message comes up there in that same little space in the upper left-hand corner, indicating that you're using your Wi-Fi to make phone calls. So it toggles back and forth kind of transparently. I've done it a few times, it seems like, and it seems to be working fine for me.
Yeah,
So
I
then,
actually have at my house, even before this was available, I had to purchase a unit from AT&T because there was absolutely no coverage where I lived to provide basically a cell signal over the internet. So it's building on that same technology, and it's worked quite well for a long time. So it's really exciting that they're kind of bringing this to everyone.
great. I've got a couple questions about personal hotspots. Is personal
Sure.
hotspot an additional charge for your cellular provider, or is that included?
I think it depends on your cellular provider, but it's my understanding that, for example, AT&T, I believe charges $10 a month for that feature. But I do believe that that varies from carrier to carrier, so you really need to check with your carrier to see whether there is a charge and how much it is.
Yeah, some plans I do understand they automatically include it as part of the package.
Yeah, I
So
think
you
you're right.
do need to be aware of what it is. I know that our plan for our business, we had to add that in, but some plans make it part of a package and you may not even realize you already have it turned on for yourself or available to yourself, I should say.
Well, and people that are buying personal hotspots from carriers, like I'm using one right now to connect with the webinar here, where it uses that cell phone, you may be able to eliminate that expense, which I think some of those are $30 a month, and pay $10 a month to save $20 a month and just use the phone itself. So, but again, check with your provider because it is going to vary.
Yeah, if you haven't used that, I use mine pretty regularly, depending where I'm going and traveling, and just turn my phone hotspot on, and it makes it's a really convenient way of getting to the internet when I have my laptop and traveling.
That's great in a pinch. Absolutely.
Great.
Okay, so the next thing we wanted to cover with iOS 9 was Wallet, which used to be called Passbook, but now they've given it a much more common and easier to remember name. So Wallet is tied to Apple Pay, but also you have the ability to put things in like the Starbucks card, my AAA card. I can have concert tickets in here. And then I can have all my credit cards and banking information in there. Uh, what's interesting about Apple Pay, and we've gotten a lot of questions from customers about this: is it safe? Is it trustworthy? Apple uses what's called tokenization. So basically, it generates a random 16-bit number that's tied to the user's device specifically. And then it also creates a cryptogram and uses Touch ID. So you're authenticating yourself. Your device is authenticating by the cryptogram. The tokenization is randomly creating a 16-digit number that has no relation to your actual account, um, and you're tying it together with your fingerprint on the phone physically. So what's great about this is you're not passing any kind of account information back between the vendor who you're shopping with and yourself. So there is, if somebody was for somehow sniffing traffic going back and forth, they would get a number that would change in seconds and really have no relation to your account. What Apple's done is basically put a separate chip in the iPhone that's able to create this. So there's a hardware piece in this in addition to the software, and many people have said this is the future of security with transactions like this because if any of you have attended our security webinar, almost every point of sale system for stores out there has been hacked or compromised at this point. So it's not even a question of is online shopping safe. It's a question of is in-person shopping safe because of the way these systems. So this really gives a level of security that is just unprecedented.
And I see, Matt, you can add several cards on here, so you're not just obligated
Yes,
to
I
having
have.
one card.
I have several credit cards. I have a bank card and even a health savings account a card on here as well. So
Now, on the other side
very
of this,
fun.
the point of sale system needs to be able to use this as well. And they think that places like Whole Foods and, of course, in Apple stores and a lot of other point of sale systems now have this kind of technology in there, but not all of them. and it's really pretty simple to use. You simply, when you're ready to pay your bill, you simply hold your phone up next to it, and a dialog will come up and ask you to put your thumbprint on there to authenticate the transaction. So it works pretty well. And
Okay,
this is
cool.
just an iPhone 6 and iPhone 6S, is that right?
It is in the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6S, the iPad Air 2,
Okay,
and the iPad Pro. So
great.
those are the units that support Apple Pay. Wallet with some of the other cards, like your Starbucks or things like that, are available on any device running iOS 9.
Got it.
Just not the Pay feature.
Okay.
So, and speaking of that, that kind of segues into security pretty well. So if I go down to Touch ID and passcode, I'm not going to put my passcode in there, but by default, with iOS 9, that now creates you create a six-digit passcode instead of a four-digit passcode. So it's enhancing that level of security on that. By turning that on, you are encrypting all of the information on that device. So you really want to make sure that that passcode is turned on and set. You can use longer than six-digit codes, but we do recommend that you at least use the six digits. The other thing that Apple is rolling out, and this is a little bit beta right now, but I think it's going to be done very shortly because a lot of other companies have it, is called two-factor authentication. And two-factor authentication means you have your password, which is one factor, and then you have a code that is either texted to your cell phone or randomly generated by some kind of app, like, for example, Google Authenticator here. I just pulled up a code, a six-digit code that will last about 20 seconds before it disappears and then creates a new six-digit code, which is only good for that time period. So I'm authenticating into that service. In this case, it would be Dropbox with my passcode and this code, and they have to match. So it's just another way to secure those systems. So Apple is, for iCloud, getting ready to roll that out, that two-factor authentication out system-wide, and that is also built into iOS 9. And then the last piece of that was the Touch ID that we talked about with Apple Pay, which is your thumbprint or fingerprint on the home button. That has become far more responsive than ever, and much more able to read the side of your finger. It's much more forgiving, and in fact, in some instances, Dave and I were joking, it's almost too responsive because I feel like sometimes I glance the button and it's logged me into my phone when I didn't really mean to. So
It is very quick.
they've done a good job.
Yeah, so the
I'm
Touch
sorry.
ID with your thumb or whatever finger you want to use is very responsive for you.
Very responsive. Okay, so we wanted to share with you some of the apps that have been updated, and the first one was Notes. So if I I open up Notes here on my iPhone, and I create a test note, and then I scroll. Basically, I slide my finger down to hide the keyboard. I get a couple of different tools here. So I can delete the note with the trash can, or if I click on my camera picture there, I can go to my photo library and I can add in a picture. So I can add in a picture to my note now, and then I can actually take and draw with that and draw on that note.
No, you're just using your finger to draw them out. You're not using any special device or anything like that, are you?
I'm not using any special device. I'm just simply using my finger. And if I click on that, I not only have the choice of, kind of the marker, the highlighter, the pencil, ruler, or eraser. I can change the color, and then I can also I believe I can change the thickness.
Yeah, I think the those three different pens there provide the thickness for
Oh,
you.
or the thickness. Okay. Yeah. and then I just hit done, and I can then draw notes. So I've got a picture, I've got my notes, and then I can actually go back to typing on that note as well. The other thing is I can actually create a checklist with that, which I think I have to, let's see, I scroll, let's see, how do I get the keyboard back? There we go. So if I click on that, I can,
What did you do to get the keyboard back?
I clicked on the bottom, I pressed my finger on the bottom below the sketch,
Got
and
it.
the keyboard automatically pops back up. So I can go to list, and then I can create a checklist on that. The other thing that's nice with this is with iCloud, I can have these notes show up on every device. So as long as I'm saving this to my iCloud account, I can go back to my iPad and pull up this exact same note and start working on it from a different device.
So these are a lot of the new features that are built. Notes was around, but what you're showing us is actually probably a lot more enhanced capability out of Notes right now.
Definitely notes on steroids.
Got it.
The other app that they really put a lot of time and effort into is Maps. So let's see, show you where I am, which is here. What's nice is if I click on the information button in the bottom right hand corner, I can go to transit, and I'm not going to have transit apparently for San Diego, but if I were home, it would show me subway lines, bus lines for any city that they've added to this. So right now they've started with the major metropolitan areas, the San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, and they're adding all the time to show the transit. Another thing I can see. Go ahead.
I'm going to have a question kind of going back. We talked about notes, and Conrad's asking a question about, is the Apple Pencil compatible with the iPhone? Apple
The
just
Apple
came out.
Pencil is only compatible right now with the iPad Pro,
Got
so
it.
it would not work for the iPhone.
Got it.
So you could use other styluses that would work on the iPhone, or you can just use your finger.
Okay.
The other thing I can do with Maps is I now have the ability to look what's nearby. As soon as my little my Outlook thing goes away. So if I click my finger in the search area, I now have categories where I can just click on the category itself. If I'm looking for shopping, if I'm looking for transportation, services, I can just click on those and get very quickly what is near me on the map. So this is really pulling, as Dave will show you a little bit later, this is really pulling and tying together Siri with Maps. So there is much stronger integration here with Siri and Maps.
Got it. Good. Looks good.
Okay.
You good
Then
there?
I'm going to hand it back to you, and you're going to talk about notes.
Yep. I'm going to take control of the presentation. Okay, should see my screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what Matt just did. I'm going to bring up my iPhone, and that should be up on the screen right now. I see it's there, and I'm going to share a few of the new features that I thought were important for us. So in my iPhone, one of the first things I came across was what's called the app switcher. And basically, you may have been familiar with in the past of when you wanted to see more than one app or get to an app you may already have open, you could double click on your home button there and it would come up. This is the new view. So basically, you would scroll through. Before, you had a little different icon view of what was going on. This is kind of the new view, what's happening. So you want to quit out of some apps or force quit an app, you'd simply swipe to the top with it and you'd force quit what it was doing. So I'm force quitting several apps at once here right now.
I really like what they've done with this because it really shows you where you left off with that app. It doesn't just show you the app itself. So if you're going back, look, it's almost like you're in Safari looking for a web page that you've been to before. I like that feature.
Yeah, I think what they really then took on steroids was the search functionality. And you kind of alluded to this already, Matt, but kind of the old search was you'd point, hold down, and you'd have a search, and you could look for something you wanted. Siri is now getting a little more intuitive as to even suggesting apps that you may want to look at, something you've listened to or used more frequently than something else, and try to help you get to it more quickly. So right now, it's offering some suggestions. There's another search. They call it actually. The name is called proactive search. I'm going to point instead of pulling down. I'm going to point and move to my finger to the right, and now I have a whole bunch of other search suggestions in here. Specifically, they're Siri suggestions. It's trying to learn what you're doing and help direct you towards some things and information. So right now I have Lizanne or Jill, my friend Lou. I could contact them. So if I click on Lizanne, it gives me a choice of very quickly calling, texting, FaceTiming, or getting more information on that person. Um, if I go back, um, I can show more other people that may be contacted. I can show less. It can then go to other people as well. Also below it has applications. So it provides you information about what applications might be useful for you at this time. What I'm seeing, what it's doing, it's actually trying to correlate time of day and applications that I'm using. So there's a little bit of a learning or intuitive aspect of what Siri is doing based on the time of day. So for example, in the nearby part, it's actually just talking about lunch. This morning when I looked at it, it talked about breakfast, gas, and shopping. So it's trying to learn what you're doing, when you need it, and try to provide you quicker access to some of the tools you may want to get to. So for lunch, I click here. It would bring up Apple Maps. I'm in by the Columbia Mall, so I have a whole slew of options, everything from Taco Bell to Panera, all around me where I'm at. And it provides that information for me as well. Another little feature that's been added to iOS 9, if you look in the upper left-hand corner on my maps, is back to search. So once you start into an app and you click into and go somewhere else, you can click the back to search, and it's going to take me where to I was just previously. So that's new as well. If you were in one spot, want to get back to it, you can go there again very quickly. All,
And that's true of any app. So if I'm in Mail and I open up a different app from within Mail, it'll also have that back to Mail. So that's a really good feature too.
So also in this proactive search, it has a news component, and I'll share more about news for you in a moment, its own specific application, but Apple's integrating it into search. And you have the ability, it's curating a few news articles for you that you may have done. You can show more, and it'll give you a longer listing, or show less, and just give you a few to look at. So that's the proactive search, which I really like a lot. I think it's done a good job of trying to make it easier to find things on there. One of the areas that it's tried to enhance as well is in settings, which I used when Matt asked me about where the Wi-Fi calling was. So in top of settings now, there is a search feature. So when I type in Wi-Fi, I can see some options that are in, where in search there's Wi-Fi options. So, it very quickly and easily get me to information that otherwise may have been a little more of a hunting and pecking operation to get to. So, search and settings can be difficult, a little bit daunting at times to find out when I want to make a change to something. So now in search, in the settings, I can look for something specific to the settings controls that I have, which makes it a lot easier. Jump out of there, and I'm actually going to jump over to one of the apps that I think Apple has done a good job with, and it's brand new. It's the News app, and in here they've done. There's other apps like it. I often used Flipboard before, but really just trying to gather lots of news when I'm running around and doing things, it can be kind of a difficult task to try to search. So right now, the News app provides me the ability to get to information quickly and easily and curate the news that I want to get to. Right now, across the top, it says I have 22 news stories. I can scroll through any one of those I want to look at. I can look at anything that's happening right now. If I want to click on something, I can click on that news article, and it'll come up for me to look at. Now, I'll share with you in a second how you can select which news articles and pieces and sources you want to get to, but it's pretty easy to work with. So I have some favorites across the bottom, which I'll select, and you can see right now I have Ars Technica, The Atlantic, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, are sources that I'm looking at right now. I can delete some of those if I wanted to by clicking the edit button, and I could delete one of those if I wanted to. So if I want to get rid of Curious, I delete that, I'm done. The Explore button lets me define what I want to get, so I can have certain suggested channels. So if I want to have The Guardian, I simply select The Guardian, it's added. If I have suggested topics areas, it'll help me with that. I can even browse certain areas. So if I want to look at certain news areas, I can, if I want to look at science, for example, it's giving me a hard time right now. I can see what other channels I have by pointing and clicking, holding down, and explore other featured channels for myself. I think there's a lot with this. It makes it a lot easier trying to find news, getting favorites and things like that. You can search. There's suggestions that are going on right now. If I want to search for Apple, there's top hits, there's news updates, there's topics about Apple itself, or there's channels that I want to select as well. So if I wanted to select 9 to 5 Mac, I could select that, click done, and I could go back to my favorites, and you can see that 9 to 5 Mac has now been added to my favorite list as well. I go for something from my sources, and I'd see kind of the updates been added as well. So you would find news articles from 9 to 5 Mac in here now as well, which I just have. Okay. So it's a great way to kind of gather a bunch of news stories up, keep up with information while you're running around. I've been using it a lot, probably one of the apps I've used more often than anything else. Another enhancement to iOS has been in the mail. One of the things that I found that's been really useful, I'm opening up mail, I'm going to create a new message. And I just had this last night. I was helping somebody out with a new iPhone they got, and they were trying to add a document. So a new feature in mail, and I'm going to send something off to Matt here and send him an email. And I'm going to add an attachment, which we weren't able to do before. By clicking and holding, I get a little dialog box that comes up. In that dialog box, I see now paste and quote level, but I can also insert a photo, and more importantly, add an attachment. So that attachment I can select, and it'll automatically take me to iCloud, but underneath locations, I can use Dropbox, for example. So I'm going to select a document out of Dropbox, my ease, and this is a Word document that I can send to Matt now, and that should go off. So that's an important enhancement. What I've seen, and I think Matt as well has probably seen, that the enhancements to iOS have been a lot more refined, and things like adding attachments makes it a more mainstream tool and not just kind of a mobile tool, but really adds a lot of features to it. So if you're using your iPad and you want to have the functionality you almost have with your desktop, it really takes the next level when you have the search functionality that we talked about, as well as adding attachments and things like that. So Apple's making strides to really improve the functionality of the operating system.
Got your email.
Great, there you go. So I'm going to take on a little bit of a challenge here by trying to share with you a little bit more about Siri. Siri has been much improved. And I say it's a challenge because I think most people who have experienced Siri in the past have seen it to be a little bit funny at times, problematic, and oftentimes not quite as responsive as what you might hope to share with you. I'm kind of finding a difference in that now, where it is much faster, a lot more accurate, and I'm using it a lot more. I'm using it for things such as sending text messages, creating reminders, simply making phone calls, and looking up information. So one of the big and first changes that they did, and let's go to the settings, and let's find Siri, is they allowed for a feature called Hey Siri. And what that does is provides the capability for Siri to be activated while not being plugged in. This feature was available previously, but you had to have it powered and plugged in to a USB port and Lightning port. So with that, now you can simply give the command and it'll activate upon the commands you want to work with. You have other choices, which voice. I have American female voice feedback always on, and you can set things up for it. The commands within Siri are pretty extensive as well. You can share and have Siri become familiar with who your family members are. So I could say, define relationships. You can have it search contacts. in a lot of different ways. So let me give you just an example of some of this. Let's see if it's going to cooperate for me. And the first thing I'm going to do is, it's not plugged in right now. Hey Siri, remind me to contact Matt Schmidt at 4 p.m.
Okay, I'll remind you.
Okay, so it just sent me a reminder. And if I look at my reminders, I see that I have a few set in there. And interestingly enough, I had set a reminder for myself earlier to record the webinar, which I did, which is good because normally I forget to record the webinar. Let's try another one. Hey Siri, send a text message to Matt Schmidt.
Okay, what do you want to say to Matt Schmidt?
Matt, can you send me a copy of today's presentation?
Your message to Matt Schmidt says, Matt, can you send me a copy of today's presentation? Ready to send it?
Send.
Done.
I have to say in the past that I wouldn't feel as confident doing that with Siri, but it's been very reliable lately. Hey Siri, what's the temperature in San Diego?
It's currently 66 degrees Fahrenheit in San Diego, California.
Hey Siri, what time is it in Denver, Colorado?
The time in Denver, Colorado is 10:49 a.m.
So its ability to really understand your voice, recognize what's going on, is really much more and greatly improved than I've seen in the past. I've seen it only fail just a few times, whereas previously I'd say, is a 50-50, shot of getting it right. It's accurate most all the time. Hey Siri, when I get to work tomorrow, remind me to submit my expenses.
I'll remind you when you arrive at work or by 9 a.m.
So one of the other things that Siri can do now is it can know where you are work, where your home is, and maybe even where you shop. So in this particular one, I have it submit my expenses at 9 a.m. when I arrive at work. So it's kind of geo-fencing what I'm doing. It knows my address for work. I actually tested it this morning. When I drove into work, I got a message at 9 a.m. It said, submit your expenses. So I see that it's working. You can even suggest to Siri where you shop. So you can say where your food store is, Safeway, to give a reminder the next time I'm at the food store, pick up milk, or when I get home, remind you to do something as well. So there's a lot more to Siri that is really capable of accomplishing a lot of good stuff that otherwise was kind of sketchy as to whether or not I could pull it off. So I'm going to check for some questions right here and see how we're doing. I know we had a question by Jeffrey about SharePoint, and it's kind of not specific to iOS 9, but I wanted to kind of get to that one before we wrap up. So Matt, we'll make sure we get that one for Jeffrey as well. And actually, we're kind of wrapping up, so I'm going to go back to my slide presentation. If you have any more questions, I ask you to get that going for us here.
I can talk a little bit about that SharePoint question.
Sure, why don't you do that while I'm doing this?
Yeah, so there are a couple of apps out there that connect back to SharePoint sites, but generally speaking, they're not reviewed very well by the people that use them. And I did some research on Microsoft's page, and they really recommend using OneDrive for Business, the app, their app, and also just using it through Safari web browsers, whether it's connecting through OWA or connecting to a SharePoint website just through a browser. So not necessarily to set up a SharePoint, but certainly to connect to one. They feel like most of the tools are available through the Safari web browser on iOS.
Great. Thanks, Matt. All right. So just to kind of close things out for us again, if you're not familiar with us, we're Use Technologies. We were founded in 1993. We provide IT managed services and cloud workspace, a cloud offering that's really kind of exciting and very innovative, and happy to help talk to you about that anytime. You can contact us through our website at easetech.com. But also have one more thing to share with you, which is in January, we have a special webinar, Keeping Your Business Secure Online. In that particular webinar, Matt mentioned it already a little bit, but we look at cyber threats, ways to stay secure. We talk about social engineering. And it's, again, pretty much like a program we have today. We spend about an hour at our free Lunch and Learn live program. That will be available on January 14th, 2016, and we'll send out some invites for everybody on that. Matt, do you have anything else to add for the group here?
I don't think so. I think we only scratched the surface for some of the things that are out there for iOS 9. So as we come across more and more things, we may post some online videos for you to take a look at. And we're happy if you send us any questions to get back to you.
Yeah, please.
I do. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right.
I do want to give a special shout out to our friends at Walter Reed that are attending with us today. We were actually doing 2 sessions on the same topic, kind of live. So we decided to include them, and then they've got a hands-on person there with them to answer any questions that they have afterwards. So thanks everybody.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Again, thank you for attending. Please direct any questions to me at dave@eastech.com. We have a blog that we post 2 or 3 articles every month on tech ideas and topics. There's a survey coming your way, and also I'll follow up with another email about the recording that we have with this as well if you want to see more details or follow up on anything that we demonstrated for you. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and have a great day.